There's Academy Award winner Tim Robbins. People's Choice Award winner Leah Thompson.
That's the way you want it. And so long, ducky.
Golden Globe nominee Jeffrey Jones.
I am now one of the dark overlords of the universe.
Produced by the godfather of sci-fi himself, George Lucas.
Yeah, these people are here to make money. They're not here. They're not fans. They don't care.
And Duck Boobs. It's Howard the Duck, but is it watchable? Thank you, warm reception that I can only wish was real, and welcome everybody to Is It Watchable? I'm your host, Paul. If you're looking to scratch your comic book movie itch, best watch Infinity War again, because this is Howard the Duck. Seems like every other movie out there is based on a comic book, and that's not a complaint. Marvel in particular is killing it with great movies that bring in big bucks. I mean, even non-fans can't bring themselves to hate on Guardians of the Galaxy. But it wasn't that long ago when comic books as source material wasn't taken very seriously. Despite some great efforts like 1978's Superman and 1989's Batman, Hollywood just didn't seem all that interested. And it's hard to blame them, really. Before the turn of the millennium, movies and TV didn't have the greatest track record with comic book material. They usually ranged from bad to worse. And even some of the greats didn't take themselves seriously. But how do you say no to George Lucas? Nobody knows, because I don't think anybody ever has. So when he picked Howard the Duck out of all the comic book characters out there, the man who gave us Star Wars and the Indiana Jones movies got his wish. And I wish he hadn't. We open up on what looks like a pretty normal city skyline, except it has two moons. That clues us in that this isn't Earth, and if we're still not convinced, we're introduced to Howard, a clothes-wearing, beer-drinking, TV-watching duck-like creature. As he's enjoying the centerfold in his Play Duck magazine, his chair begins to shake violently before it's sucked backwards, smashing through neighboring apartments, out the side of his building, and into a portal in the sky. He flies through space in an unfinished-looking effect sequence, then crash lands in a rough neighborhood in Cleveland, Ohio. The reactions to Howard's appearance are all over the map. Some seem to think he looks as fake as the audience does and are largely unconcerned, while others have obviously never seen a Halloween costume and are terrified. During this entire sequence, bad 80s pop rock plays in the background courtesy of the Cherry Bombs, led by Beverly, played by Leah Thompson, using her actual singing voice. After the show, Beverly walks the rough streets alone and is nearly raped. Luckily, Howard is sulking nearby and comes to the rescue.
Huh? Let the female creature go!
The would-be rapists run away, and Beverly and Howard, perhaps not wanting to be labeled tattlers, don't bother calling the cops.
This is unreal. I mean, it can't be.
Thanks.
You're not really, a duck?
Thankful for his help, Beverly invites Howard to come home with her.
Nice place. You pay to live here?
Ever notice in movies that every cheap and dumpy apartment is also huge and awesome? During some small talk, Howard reveals that he too has jumped of being a rock star, which, since this is an 80s movie, provides us with some foreshadowing in the worst way. Once Howard is asleep, Beverly decides to go through his wallet. Okay, so we've got Marshington, D.C., Mallard card instead of MasterCard, Blooming Ducks instead of Bloomingdale's. Earlier, he's reading a Play Duck magazine. He's got movie posters for Breeders of the Lost Stork and Splash Dance instead of Flash Dance. Look, I get that they were trying to generate some laughs from a bunch of duck puns, but they've made it pretty clear that he's from an alternate universe that's pretty much like Earth except for, you know, with ducks instead of people. So the puns just come off as extra cheesy because it's not like in our world we work the words human or people into all of our brand names. Bloomingmans or Humandales. See, it's stupid. The next day, Beverly takes Howard to meet her scientist friend Phil, but like a moron, she puts him in a trash bag to avoid drawing too much attention. Just say your kid wanted to wear his duck costume. He looks fake anyway. Phil is played by the great Tim Robbins. Admittingly not his best work. Insulted, Beverly and Howard march out and have a heated exchange of bad acting where they decide to part ways.
That's the way you want it. And so long, ducky.
So now begins the hilarious fish out of water segment. First, Howard visits the unemployment office where being a duck makes no difference, and he lands a job at, I think, a brothel.
You are supposed to be the water expert I asked for. You are going to fix it.
I quit!
Once again, Howard is homeless and unsure what to do. He winds up moping back to the neighborhood where he landed and hears a familiar voice. Inside the club, he overhears Beverly's manager making a shady deal involving the girls in the band. Howard intervenes and there's a bar fight complete with the way overused shot of a character sliding down the bar. Howard wins the fight and the manager agrees to release the band from their contract. So Beverly and Howard make up amid some creepy romantic tension.
I was worried about you. I missed you.
And as they're about to leave, Phil, still trying to figure out where Howard came from, plucks one of his tail feathers to take back to the lab. Back at the apartment, Howard pumps out some sick 80s synthesizer jam as Beverly listens in her underwear. Then she walks around in her underwear. Then she removes her robe and crawls seductively on the bed in her underwear while Howard admires her in her underwear. She invites him into bed and things get kind of weird.
Like they say, Dal, love's strange. We could always give it a try.
Listen, I'm pretty tired.
It's just that you're so incredibly soft and cuddly.
Bev, let's be realistic. I mean, my apartment's zillions of miles from here. You're 3 feet taller than I am.
I just can't resist your intense animal magnetism.
That's probably the most infamous scene in this movie, and I have to agree with almost everybody who's ever reviewed this film. It's pretty uncomfortable to watch. Even if she wasn't actually going to do anything with Howard, that setup kind of makes your skin crawl. Just the implication of bestiality. See, I don't even like saying that word. And if you combine that scene with the duck boobs from the beginning and Howard leering at the Play Duck magazine and that weird brothel scene, this film doesn't seem like the family movie it was marketed to be. And I get that the Howard the Duck comics have always been intended for mature audiences, and if this movie had went all in that direction, it probably would have been better. But it sort of feels like they're trying to please both sides here, and as a result, I don't think they pleased anybody. While Howard and Beverly are breaking laws in all 50 states, Phil and his scientist friends barge in. One of the scientists, Dr. Jennings, explains how Howard was brought to Earth.
Some unknown force was redirecting the laser beam from its original target so that it hit your planet instead. When the beam hit, you must have been caught up in a massive energy inversion which literally dragged you through space back to the power source here on Earth.
They plan to send Howard back using the same basic method but in reverse, which makes Howard both happy and sad because of his unholy feelings towards Beverly.
Of all the alleys in the world I could have fallen into that night, why did it have to be yours?
But when they arrive at the lab, something has gone horribly wrong. Dr. Jennings is missing and something else has been brought back through the laser in the same way Howard was. The police are called in and they quickly place Howard under arrest.
Lieutenant, what's the charge, sir?
Illegal alien.
But he escapes like 30 seconds later and he and Beverly are on the run. While hiding from the cops, they run into Dr. Jennings, who isn't looking or feeling too well. They get away in Jennings' car and despite his condition, they let him drive.
The pain. It's like I'm transforming inside. I'm afraid I'm about to become something else.
Since Jennings is in no shape to drive, they decide to grab a bite to eat. Seriously. While in the restaurant, Jennings' transformation is complete.
I am now one of the dark overlords of the universe.
Next, some locals start to harass Beverly, and when Howard comes to her defense, a fight breaks out. Despite his mad pie in the face skills, Howard is overpowered and is taken to the kitchen so he can be cooked. Yup, cooked. Luckily, Howard has the code key that the Dark Overlord needs to access the laser, so he saves Howard then destroys the entire restaurant for some reason. Before he leaves, the Dark Overlord takes the code key and Beverly and speeds off in a semi-truck. Like most Dark Overlords and cell phones, our villain needs power to keep himself charged up, so he plugs into the cigarette lighter. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, Howard pretends to be a statue to avoid detection and rescues Phil from the back of a police car. Then the two, get this, decide to escape by putting an ultralight aircraft together.
It looks like an airplane.
Well, it will be. We can put it together in no time. Somebody's weekend hobby is going to get us back to that lab.
Keep in mind that they made this decision after determining that stealing a car would be too risky. More risky than assembling an airplane and learning how to fly it. Now back to Beverly and the Dark Overlord, where, to get even more power and to pad out the plot, they stop by a nuclear power plant where Dio poses as a visitor to charge up. Meanwhile, our two idiots finally get their plane in the air. And what comes next is a long, drawn-out race to the lab where the Dark Overlord is headed to use the laser to bring down more Dark Overlords. During this whole back-and-forth stretch, we get lots of high-flying hijinks complete with near misses and car crashes and stuff that is supposed to be exciting and or funny. Finally, everyone is back at the lab where the Dark Overlord has Beverly tied to the laser in classic supervillain style. This is so the next Dark Overlord can take over her body. Phil locates a weapon that can destroy the Dark Overlord, but when they try to sneak it into position...
What's this do?
Really? Soon we get an Old West type showdown because why not? Jennings is no longer possessed, but now the Dark Overlord is on the loose in his true form. A bad special effect. See, if you can't pull off the effect, just don't do it. Put a guy in a rubber suit. Anything would be better than this. So after some more uninspired fighting and more bad special effects, Howard manages to again line up the neutron disintegrator and fires it at the monster. Then, with only 1 second remaining, of course, before the Dark Overlords arrive, Howard destroys the laser and saves the world. After the dust settles, they think Howard is dead because he's laying down with his eyes closed, but he's alive. Finally, because this is a bad 80s movie, they can't let the audience go home without seeing our heroes rocking it out on stage.
We call him Howard the Duck. No way to conceal it. Be that hot enough for you.
I would love to know what song they actually played for the extras in that scene, because you know they weren't dancing like that to Leah Thompson singing Howard the Duck. As I mentioned earlier, Howard the Duck was based on the Marvel comic books of the same name created by Steve Gerber and Val Mayerick. The books had a far different tone, however. Howard's character had a much more abrasive personality, plot lines were more satirical in nature with absurdist sensibilities. It was definitely not written for children. And George Lucas loved the comics and was reportedly interested in making a Howard the Duck movie not long after the success of his 1973 film American Graffiti. Originally, the movie was intended to be animated, which, let's face it, would have been so much better, but Lucas was contractually obligated to deliver a live-action film, so we got what we got. The role of Howard is primarily played by Ed Gale, but only after the child actor they hired didn't work out. Tough shooting conditions and an uncomfortable costume proved to be too much for the kid, and Ed Gale, who was originally hired to do night shoots and stunt work, took over full-time. And speaking of casting, the role of Beverly nearly went to Tori Amos.
What if I'm a mermaid in this jeans of his with her name still on it?
Yeah, her! She had stage presence and a killer voice. She would have made a lot of sense, but after Leah Thompson became available, she got the role because she was Leah Thompson in 1985. And of course, the movie absolutely bombed at the box office, making only $37 million worldwide against a production budget of $36 million. So Howard the Duck, is it watchable? Not really. Howard the Duck is so bad, it's just bad. Not worth your time or the $3 you'll spend to rent it. If it pops up on TV, even if you only have 2 channels, there'll be something better on the other channel. The only thing that saves this movie from being totally unwatchable is the train wreck effect. You get to see a young Leah Thompson and a young Tim Robbins amid all the wreckage, and you get to see what all the infamously bad negative hype is all about. But ultimately, what makes this movie so painful is that there's nothing there. All the jokes are flat, the action is paint by numbers, and the plot is paper thin and padded with stuff you've seen before in much better movies. Toss in the bad effects, fake-looking duck costume, and cringy relationship stuff, and you get a movie that definitely lives up to its reputation. Well, that wraps up this episode. Be sure to join me next time when I tackle Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. Consider it an early Christmas present, and don't forget to subscribe.